So, sir, what are you going to do this upcoming February?
So this upcoming February, I'm going to be going back to El Salvador. So I was adopted from El Salvador, age of 1, maybe like 1.5. I've never been back since. I always had like an inkling in my mind, maybe go back at some point, but I really was never very like super into the concept of going back to El Salvador. I was never very interested in Spanish culture growing up. My parents did a great job trying to like get me into Spanish-speaking programs, get me into Spanish culture and stuff. I just wasn't really interested, honestly. But in the last, I'd say 2 years or so, I've become a lot more interested in going back to El Salvador, and also just watching different movies and listening to my friends' stories of being adopted. It really made me want to examine this part of my life more. Also, on this channel, I actually made a video that got a bunch of views on my 23andMe test results. So 23andMe, it breaks down your genetic genome, your DNA sequence, and mine was pretty much half Latino and half American, which is kind of, half Native American and half European, which is pretty expected given the history and past of El Salvador. But what I said in one of the videos was that El Salvador was from my conception, a dangerous place, or a place that's not as safe as what you consider to be the developed world. And I got a lot of backlash and hate from that video. People saying, you don't know what you're talking about, you're talking down on these people, you're talking down on your own people, clearly this gringo doesn't know what he's talking about, like all these different things I got hate on. And I clearly explained in the next video, that's just my conception. I'm not gonna lie to you that being raised by an American family in the United States doesn't give me certain preconceptions about the third world or people from that area. Hearing about gang violence, hearing about these different things, obviously I'm going to have a preconceived notion. But that video and also the movie Lion kind of made me want to explore my past a bit more and get to know this area of the country more, of the world more.
Are there any things that you are nervous to find out, or things you're hoping to find out about that area?
About the area, I do have a slight feeling of like anxiety when it comes to traveling there myself, getting around without knowing, fluent Spanish, and also some of the history there with like related to gangs and, not the best, I guess the word controlled country. But like at the same time, from what I've read, it's mainly like violence within the gangs. It's not really directed towards tourists. And from whatever else I've read, it's very, according to other people that have been there, very beautiful and very safe. So I don't know, we'll see. So I do have some apprehension there. I don't really have much apprehension otherwise around the country. Like I've been to different countries around the world myself. I feel very confident traveling by myself. I feel pretty good getting around, so I don't really have any apprehension there, I would say.
Okay. Anything you're hoping to like find out more of, or you just want to kind of see the area? Like, what's your purpose?
What's my purpose? I think the purpose is to fully understand what it would be like had I grown up there. What would my life be like? What is the psychology like of these people that are living there? What are the customs like? What kind of view do they have of the world, their place in the world, these different things? I think that'd be really interesting to find out. I also am curious about how people receive me there. So like being an American, being someone who is adopted from there, who's not fluent Spanish speaker, how will people react to me? Are people going to think I'm also a Salvadorian or American? Like what are they going to, what's their response going to be? And I also am curious about my actual birthplace, the area in the country, because it's a very rural area. It's not an area many tourists would go to. And I kind of want to go there just to experience, like, one, what is this place like? If I was growing up there, how would my life be different? But also, I'm kind of curious about if I can in any way get in touch with my birth mother or any other, siblings or anything like that. Because I'm an only child. I don't know if I have brothers or sisters. We kind of fell out of contact with the birth mother, so I don't know what's going to happen there. Could be positive, could be negative. I'm kind of curious about that.
Okay. Do you have like any predictions of, you know, exactly like how the air, like what the people will be like there, or how you kind of play your role? Like, what parts of you do you feel like are rooted in that culture that you may not know of?
Being my age, 26, I think I'm a little bit skewed in my thoughts. You know, I might, when as I mature, change my thoughts, but this channel is all about me being authentic and being honest with myself. Like, it's great if you guys enjoy these videos, if you get something out of my story, maybe it motivates you to go and find your birth mother or your own journey. This is more though sort of for me, to be honest. So I'm capturing like my accurate thoughts here. I think that when it comes to meeting that person, you know, the group that raised me and that kind of stuff, I think that like who I am, what I consider to be me, is so different than like anything that could be raised there. Like, I've been influenced so much by American culture, by the books I've read, all these different things. So I don't really feel like I'm going to discover like a new portion of myself. I think it's going to give me a view of my life in a different light. And I also kind of think that like the people there are, from everything I've heard, are amazingly nice, like very well grounded, amazing traditional values, very rooted in Christianity and good practices. They're extremely nice to foreigners from what I've read on different forums. So I have only positive thoughts when it comes to the El Salvadoran people. You know, that's at least what I've heard. I don't know. When it comes to like, I guess, what was your question?
Asking like how you think parts of you would have played into the culture. Like, you mentioned, you know, the style of the people and kind of matching it up to yourself. So what are your pre-predictions before you go there? Like, how do you think they'll be, and how you might have been if you were there, or how many you might have tendencies that are similar to them?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think there definitely is, you know, biology in me that plays into my behavior and like my decision making, these different things. This is just my own assessment. I think if I was to know my father, he probably is very similar, or you know, or my mother maybe, to some of my natural inclinations. So like having a very addictive personality, going a little bit to the extreme with certain things, and just being, you know, having this desire for achievement and power and these different things, that can play out in many different ways. So for example, in an environment where there are potentially gangs, or there are potentially, you know, sales of drugs, or these different things, if I was raised in that environment, I'd probably be very likely to join a gang and to try to like be one of the top dogs in that gang or something like that. Just the where you're placed from your own biology is going to change and influence your life. So I don't know. You know, I have a feeling like my mother probably does not, you know my father, or like did not have, you know, strong enough connections there to be married or something. I don't know. That's just my own thought process. I think that it could be that there was either, you know, some kind of, it was an unplanned thing, or he has something negative around him. Maybe he's even a Taurus. I don't know. I kind of doubt that one. But I think there's something negative around him for some reason. And with the mother, from everything I've heard, the only thing she told my parents was that she wants to make sure I was raised right, and then I was raised Catholic, and then I was being brought to a better life. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that says to me she's probably a really amazing person and like really well rooted in values and traditions. So I don't really think anything negative quite from that. Like, I don't know why she would give me up, other than maybe there were too many siblings already. Maybe she reached the point where she couldn't provide for any more, something like that. Or, you know, it could be honestly anything. Like, she didn't want me to be subject to bad influences. I try to think of like the different reasons why she would give me up, which I'm so thankful she did, because like I freaking love my life here. You know, I live in a very well-established society, so I'm very happy I was given up, if you will. So I don't know, but I guess in terms of like my own personality, I don't connect very much with Spanish culture. Like, I'm just saying that flatly. Like, I had no experience with Spanish cuisine. I'm not religious. I have nothing in the way of a fan of Spanish customs and traditions. That's not me. I'm not interested in that really. Like I'm interested in exploring it and learning about it, but fundamentally that's not how I grew up. And also even when it comes to like American traditions and American cuisine and these different things, I'm only partially interested in that kind of stuff. Like most of who I am has come from things like personal development and personal growth and achieving the things I want and like reading up on things like business and fitness and self-improvement. Like I feel like I've sculpted my own reality to a high degree at this age, and that's just due to having to. And my parents like have a very different mindset and view than I do about the world, about the workplace, about values, all these different things. So I'm already so different from the society that I'm in right now that I don't think, if I don't think that a lot of my identity will be invested in that, like going to El Salvador and like discovering the society there.
Like, what about the movie Lion kind of got you into like going? Because you're not going for the culture, and for him it was going to see his mother that he had lost, or the town that he grew up in. You kind of like didn't grow up there, so what kind of prompted you? What emotions came about with that movie?
I guess that's true, because Lion, he kind of felt like outside of his culture, and where he grew up as a child was very different than where he ended up. He kind of always felt like an outsider. I definitely have always felt like an outsider, but I'm weird in that like my identity has never been associated with being white really, or a Spanish, or like all these different things. Like I've never treated differently because I was adopted, which I know a lot of people have been when they were growing up. I was never treated differently for being Hispanic despite being grown up in a white community. So yeah, there's not that same similarity. I think for me, it was just kind of like when watching that movie, it is one of those things where like I never really thought that like, wow, I guess I could go and discover where I'm from. Like it's true. Like there's nothing really stopping me. Like I'm in a good place financially. I'm in a good place mentally where I am, right now. Like there's nothing stopping me from discovering this mystery sort of. And I think that, it's kind of like with that movie, it just opens up the possibility in my mind. Like I started to think about it a little bit more and, realizing, well, I can look on Google Maps and like see, oh, this is the region I grew up in. Like, that's interesting. Like it's right there. I could freaking take a flight there and see what it's like. So it made it much more accessible in my mind in a way. And seeing his growth, I think, and being able to meet his mother also made me think about just the emotions that girls and women feel about motherhood. So like to actually have a child is not something that I'm familiar with, not something that I'm ever going to have, physically. But for a girl, it's just like it's a massive event in their life, and it's something where you're bringing life into the world. And you're naturally predisposed to love that thing that you bring in and to want better for it, usually. So like that movie made me also see like how this mother had brought this child into the world and how much she missed it and how much she still was emotionally connected to that person despite it being years and years in the future. And him having a completely different world that he was raised in, she still loved him. So it made me think more also about that, like, wow, I wonder if this woman is thinking or thinks about me, once every in a while, like, what is this kid up to? Or like, will he ever come back? Or what would that be like? Like, I wonder if she ever has thoughts like that. Or if, she could be too painful for her where she just like cut it off mentally. I don't know. So it kind of made me think about that.
Okay. So, do you have like any strong feelings in relation to like just adoption in general, or like, if you think about what if the chance was you met your mother there, you met your family, or any like feelings going into this before you get to El Salvador?
I can't really speak for anyone else regarding adoption. Like I've heard most of the people I've talked with who have been adopted have actually told me they felt very different. They felt very alienated. They didn't feel like very part of the culture they grew up in, or that they kind of felt given up or abandoned in a certain way, and that's multiple people I've talked with. They've been teased when they were growing up. I never had anything like that. None, no experience whatsoever. I always thought like my parents were very, they were very conscious of making me feel like their child and be like, yes, you're adopted, but like we love you and like you are no different from everyone else. Like you can achieve whatever you want, all these different things. And because I was, good at sports when I was growing up, because I had lots of friends growing up, I was never really teased for that. And if it ever was teased, like I remember like one time a kid made fun of me for my race and we were all just like, what are you doing? Like it made him look weird. It didn't make me look weird. So I never had that experience growing up because of the environment, I guess, and also just the social circles that I was a part of. But I do know my friends were like aware of that because they would, sometimes my friends would be like, oh, I'm sorry, like, is that a sensitive topic? Like, I didn't mean to ask you that. And I'd be like, no, bro, like, that's fine. Like, it's not a big deal for me. But I recognize now as I've gotten older, it is a big deal for other people. So for me, the way I feel about it is, I guess, I always felt like a certain degree of anger or like a certain degree of disdain for people who have acted as though I am like Latino or El Salvadorian and like try to talk to me in Spanish or don't like the fact that I'm not Latino. I've always been like, sorry, like I'm not. Like I didn't grow up in that environment. So I always felt like a certain degree of anger and need to assert myself for those people who like wish I was more connected with my past in that way. And then for like more predominantly white people, it never really came up that much, but I always did feel like a certain level of like, well, it really doesn't matter. Like the only thing that matters in this world is like my achievements, what I can actually do, my intelligence, my judgments, like the actual race and color of my skin, besides making me maybe more predisposed for certain sports like soccer or having a body that's more athletic, can do things, certain sports, not good at other sports like basketball. Like it has those effects, but it really doesn't have any other effects. Most of the effects I've had in my life have come from my own, going out there and achieving things, developing more social skills, being aware of these different things is actually what caused the impact in my life. So I kind of always have felt like, who cares that I'm adopted? Like, it doesn't even matter. Like, it doesn't play into any meaningful results in my own life. I can maybe use it in a story to make people connect with me more, but I've never felt like, oh, this is a big part of my life and like it's leading to this like grand thing. Like I've always felt as though it was a minor thing that didn't really matter. Like I feel like if I was born anywhere and you put me into this society with the influences I have, the books I've read, that I would still come to this point. And as long as I had like this desire and hunger, which probably is biological, honestly, to a certain degree, that I would end up at the same place. So I've always felt a little bit of like disdain and anger for people that made it seem like a big deal.
So usually when people go to like where they were born or something, they hope to gain something from it. Like some would hope to gain like closure, They know this is what their life would have been like, or they know like, wow, these people gave up for me, or this is where I would have been. Like there's some sort of emotion that they always seek to gain.
Yeah.
What kind of emotion are you seeking to gain? Wild.
Yeah. The emotion I want to gain is understanding of myself, and understanding, I guess, of the events that brought me into my existence. I would love to give closure to like even my parents, honestly, being like, hey, thank you so much for raising me, for treating me like just like one of your own children. Thank you, like give them closure to a certain degree. Or like my birth mother, if I was to meet her and like be like, yes, like you made an amazing decision, thank you so much for giving me up. Like that would be a great way to give her a certain degree of closure. I don't really have a desire to like enter into the family again or something like that. I mean, if they like wanted me to like occasionally reintegrate or something, I would be okay with that. But I don't speak Spanish. I don't know their customs, these things. Like, it'd be more of to give some mental closure to her and also to myself, you know, some knowing at least where I came from, and to give me the full picture here, like a full understanding of who I am, and it's just to sort of from that emotion, I guess also feel like what could have life been, because there's always that difficulty with, I think, achievement when you come from a more wealthy background or like an upper middle class background. Like, you don't have the same level of hunger as someone who moves from a poor country to America and they then become, I don't know, a business owner or the immigrant success story. It's because they know how bad it could be, and living in America is so much better and so much more amazing from a financial standpoint that they're really motivated to succeed. Whereas you have kids in middle class that like grow up here and they're not really motivated. They go to a job, they do these different things. There's no real hunger there. For me, if I was to see that and say like, wow, that could have been my life, I owe it to myself to achieve all of these things. Like, think of what that could have been. That kind of also just brings my hunger, I feel like, to another level. So it has that degree. I'm not too much of like an emotional guy around this issue, I think, more than, you know, than some other people. But I would find it really interesting to know my father, because I think, I mean, I would also, it would be interesting to see like my vision of what that he would be like versus what it would be in reality, to see my prediction skills. I also think it would be interesting because, you know, your father, your biological father, kind of in a certain degree could give you a sense of what your potential is. And now I know that's definitely not true, you know, based on where you grew up and the influence you've had, but it could lend me some thoughts like, wow, I could end up like this if I'm not careful. Or I could end up like this if I do things right. You know, like, it gives you a sense of what your biology is like. And it can honestly make me more be like, oh, wow, like, you know, I've, despite having this genetic code and this person turning out this way, I was able to turn out this way. It also can give that sort of positive view on my life. Like, I am in control. It is not only biology or something like that. So I guess I have that emotion towards it. So I think a lot of people that might watch this video might think that I'm cold, might think that I should think differently, might think that I should feel differently about the adoption or about what I'm going to be doing or about the process. And I honestly would love to hear from you. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to entertain that viewpoint. You know, there's a reason why I feel the way I do, I think the way I do. I've definitely put a lot of thought into it. But I mean, I would be interested to hear from other people out there what your perception of me is, or what your perception of hearing this story is and what I'm about to do. I'd also love to hear from you if you are out there and you're thinking of getting in touch or in contact with the people that put you up for an adoption, or your own experience with adoption. Would love to hear from you in the comments down below. This is honestly my candid thought process, candid feeling at this age. Might change as I get older, might change as I mature, but this is how I'm feeling right now. Again, my name is Sal, and I'll see you next time.